Hey, my name is Jeff. I'm part of the teaching team here at Rainier View Christian Church. We're so excited that you've chosen to join us as we kick off a brand new series, The Lost Art of Friendship. Now, before we go any further, I would love if you are joining us live online to put in the chat, or if you're with some people around you right now, go ahead and turn to somebody and share what you think Jesus' greatest miracle was outside of the resurrection. So think about all the miracles you may or may not know from the Bible, well, but pick what you think Jesus' greatest miracle probably was. Take about 30 seconds to do that now. Well, if we're going by memes on the internet, apparently Jesus' greatest miracle was spending lots and lots of time in his 30s with his 12 closest friends. Pretty impressive feat. And so we're in this series because friendships can be difficult for us to build and keep and maintain. What was so easy in kindergarten, going out to the playground, hey, do you want to play? Boom, instant BFFs, becomes so much more difficult as we become teenagers, as we move into adulthood, to maintain, find, keep friendships. It just becomes challenging, and the majority of people actually don't have very many friends, if at any at all, beyond their spouse, beyond family, to show up in their life, in their world, when there's an emergency, when something pops up where you just need some extra help, where you just need to process and share the events of your day, your week, your month with somebody else. And many people just simply feel like they don't have a friend like that to turn to. And it's being verified in research that we are in a period of time where people are the most deficient in their friendships that they've been in many years in recent history. So consider a Pew Research study that was just done, where Americans, by the way, said that they ranked having friendships as more important than even getting married and having kids and making a lot of money. So it's not that friendships don't matter, we're just struggling to find and maintain them. And so in their study, they found that just over half of Americans say they have between 1 to 4 close friends, with 8% of people saying they have no close friends at all. Now, you might be saying, well, but at least the majority of people have friends, so what's the big deal? But compared to historically how people have indicated friendships, we are lacking them much, much more so than in previous generations. Consider what Juliana Kaplan writes for Business Insider. She writes, 1/3 of Americans in 1990 said they had 10 or more close friends, while just 13% said the same thing in 2021. And while there's the old refrain about quality over quantity, Americans become more satisfied with the number of friends they have as that number increases. Daniel Cox, the director of the Survey Center on American Life at the American Enterprise Institute, that's a mouthful, get a better name, anyways, told me that the notion that you can have 1 or 2 close friends and that's enough to get you through things is just not borne out by the data. He added, we find that even for close friends, the more you have, the better you do on a variety of measures, whether it's loneliness, whether it's physical health, life satisfaction. All these things are higher when you hit 4, 5, or 6 friends. And then consider some of the trends around friendship recently discussed in a recent PBS NewsHour that highlighted, in particular, the challenge for men to form and forge friendships into adulthood. Yes, this is something that both men and women need to pay attention to, and we need help to develop friendships, but men particularly so, because they found that 15% of young men under 30 report not having one close friend. That's a 5 times jump from just 3% reported in the 1990s saying that they did not have one close friend. And while men make up 50% of the population roughly, they account for nearly 80% of all suicides. This is why friendship matters so much. It's why we're doing a series around the lost art of friendship, because this is just a peek at the problems we have around this today. And it's because in every article and study that I just referenced, in each and every one of them came up as one of the solutions was church, referred to as religious institutions, came up as a potential answer to speak to the lack of friendships and how to form and develop them. And so even the world outside, apart from faith, recognizes that the church has an answer to helping forge community, to help people develop friendships. And we have an opportunity to speak into this, into our culture today. And so the question really is not just how do I find friends, but how do I keep my friendships? How do I nurture them? How do I help deepen them and see them enrich my life? And so how do we manage the seasons of life that bring change to friendships? Right? We have seasons where we have kids, we come, we move, job things are up and down, we have health issues, right? Friendship is not a static thing. How do we navigate those waters? And so what if this year was the year that you learned to reclaim a little bit of the ability to develop some deeper, more meaningful friendships, to invest in the ones you have, maybe in a more intentional way, so that you could feel more connected to others and supported. This is what we want for you here at Rainier View Christian Church. It's what God wants for you. And we're going to see that in the Bible, in His Word. And so open up to the Gospel of John with me. We're going to primarily be in chapter 11, but we're going to start a few chapters later in John 15. And we're going to see what Jesus models for us there. And it's this, that better friendships await those who go first. We read of Jesus in the Gospels, we can learn this principle that better friendships await those who go first. So look with me in John 15, beginning in verse 11. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. My command is this, love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. And so we see here Jesus defining and extending what friendship means and looks like. Now, we need to understand that when we come across the word love in the Bible, that there are multiple words that have different aspects to what love means and looks like and how it's expressed, versus in the English, which is kind of one big word, love, that refers to all these things. But there are two Greek words that we translate as love that I want to talk about that are pertinent to friendship. The first one is phileo, and the second one is agape. Okay? Phileo love describes that warm, emotional feeling of friendship. You see somebody like, man, you're my bro, right? Like that is phileo love, that friendship, that warm, emotional connection we feel to others. Agape love is very different. Agape is the self-sacrificial commitment to the good of another, the well-being of somebody else above my own well-being. And agape is the most common used word for love in the New Testament, and it's the most uniquely Christian version of love. Now, I share that because here's the problem. As people today in 2024, we often look for phileo-type connection first. Who we vibe with, who we like, who it's easy to connect with. That's what we're looking for in our friendships with other people. And instead, the biblical version of pursuing friendship is actually to start with agape. Seek the common good of other people, and then as you do that, relationships with phileo-type emotional kind of friendship will follow suit, ideally. But biblically, you start with agape, and then those warm feelings of friendship follow from that. And so that gives us a place to start. But some of you just lead with phileo-type love all the time. You are just out there making it happen. I would just say, watch your phileo meter, okay? Maybe don't go full Chris Farley with people you just met.
I've always dreamed about having a brother.
Speak of the devil.
Oh, brother! Brother?
I'm Paul. You must be Tommy.
Brothers don't shake hands. Brothers gotta hug.
So what's the big takeaway from what we just read in John 15? Well, I think it's this. Jesus didn't wait for friendships to happen, for people just to come to him. He pursues relationship with others and with us. And if we even remotely take the New Testament seriously and what it says and how it commands us to live, we will go first. Better friendships await those who go first. I want to turn now to an account a few chapters earlier in John 11, one of the few examples of Jesus pursuing friendship and relationship outside of his 12 disciples in terms of people that he spent ongoing time with in relationship. And so we're going to see Jesus acting on both this agape and phileo love towards Mary, Martha, and their brother Lazarus. They've become family to him. Now, disclaimer, this John 11 passage is very long. We're not going to be able to get into all the details and explain everything, but what we want to do today is examine this passage and see, what is Jesus modeling for me when it comes to friendships? What can you and I emulate and take with us and learn about friendships from looking at this passage? So Jesus models for us a way to go first, and so we're going to jump right in here. John 11, beginning verse 1. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." When he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days, and then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you are going back?" So people are trying to kill you there. What are you thinking? Verse 9, Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light." After he had said this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up." Now, there could have been a lot of reasons that Jesus could have given that would have been legitimate to not go. Hey, I don't need to threaten my life yet. Okay, I'm not ready to go there and put myself in a dangerous situation. I'm busy helping other people. I can't be everywhere at once. There would be a lot of reasons that Jesus could have given for not going, and yet Jesus chooses to go. You and I might not risk our lives in the pursuit of friendship, but going first to build friendships requires us to risk something. It requires us always to risk something. You know, I've been a pastor for about 20 years now, full time, and so over the course of our 3 churches we've worked at, we've always tried to be intentional about building community, building friendships within our church wherever we are. And that's has its own set of challenges being a pastor, but something we've been able to do. But in one of our previous church experiences, we had a small group where we spent years together, just getting together every week, having our kids over, being there in crisis for each other, being there with activities. We were building community, building friendship. And then one day, 2 families, their 2 kids had a conflict with each other. And because this happened at church, we were drug into picking sides, drug into it's my fault that this conflict happened because it was at church as a pastor when ministry was going on. And so immediately, years of friendship went up as people decided to say, hey, pick a side. Who are you going to support? How could you not step in and allow this to happen? And all these accusations, all this stuff. People speaking out a lot of their own hurt, a lot of their own previous experiences and things like that. But man, all that work, years of work pursuing friendships, basically feeling like it ended. And so I get here to Rainier View about 5 years ago. And I was in a season where I said, you know what? I think I'm done with that. I don't think I want to put myself out there. Like, I'll be friendly to everybody, but my friends, no, that's going to be outside of church. Because why? I didn't want to risk being back in that situation. I didn't want to risk putting in that time with people who would turn around and one day hurt me. Now, fortunately, my wife Amy really said, no, we're not going to do that. You got to get over it. We do have to have friendships at our church. And so even though I was resistant for a season, came around and said, no, you know what? You're right. We need to do this. And I'm so, so glad that we made the decision to say, no, we're going to continue to pursue building deep, meaningful friendships with some people here within our church. Just because I'm a pastor, I'm not going to say I'm exempt from that. And it's been so life-giving, so rich, so rewarding for me to do so. Now, regardless of who you are and the challenges you have and the things going on in your life, there will be experiences that get in the way. There will be reasons for you not to pursue and build friendships. My question is, will you choose to go first anyways? Will you take that step and do that? Now, back to the passage, you might be wondering about something here that's a little odd. Like, why does Jesus wait 2 days to go? Like, if he left right away, if he left immediately, couldn't he have saved Lazarus, right? And yes, that's probably likely true. But Jesus wants his friends to understand the extent of his love and his friendship and his power, one that extends even beyond the power of death. But we're getting ahead of ourselves in the story a little bit. Before we go any further, I'm going to recap a chunk of these verses for us, because again, it's a long passage. We don't have time to talk about everything, but verses 12 through 29, I encourage you to read, for you to read that on your own, but a couple details to know. First, in that chunk, we see that Lazarus has been in the grave 4 days, the text says. Okay? That's an important detail because it's clear Jesus was not coming to perform some sort of CPR, right? Like, Lazarus has definitely died at this point in time. And then we see Martha approach Jesus first when he comes to town, and she's a little bit more polite in her grief. And she says, yes, I know there's a future comfort. I know there's a future resurrection. But Jesus alludes to the fact that the resurrection and the life is actually in front of her and here with her. And so let's pick up the passage back up in verse 30 with Mary's slightly less polite grief as she unpacks it with Jesus. The passage goes on to say, now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary were in the house comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? And so Jesus models here for us, we can take from this exchange that Jesus continues to show us what it looks like to go first, to stepping towards friendship even when it's difficult. Because the awkwardness here is that, yes, Jesus could have spared Mary and Martha this grief had he wanted to. And the emotions underneath the written words we see in the gospel, I believe, are Mary's frustration, hurt, and disappointment that are directed at Jesus. Let's not miss that here. And how do we know this? Jesus' response. He's deeply moved by her pain. But if Mary is like any other human being who's lived on planet Earth, right? In the moment, she can't understand the reasons. She's deeply and profoundly working through her grief in this moment. Now, when it says there in the text that Jesus was deeply moved in spirit and troubled, that original Greek term that we translate that way would refer to the angry snorting and stomping of a war horse or a race horse. This power that's just barely being restrained and held back. And when that phrase is applied to humans, it unequivocally refers to outbursts of anger, even fury. And so it begs the question, why is Jesus furious here? What is Jesus so outraged about in this moment? Now, it's clear that he's not outraged about Mary and Martha's grief in this moment. We see how much he cared. The crowd saw how much he cared. Jesus weeps along with them. But there's this part of the passage, to go back to verse 25, that we didn't read, that's important for us to read now to make sense of what's happening here. In verse 25, we read Jesus saying, I am the resurrection and the life. And so Jesus, not surrounded by gentle tears and a little bit of sniffling, but loud, expressive wailing that would have marked grief in that culture, he's upset at the despair. He's upset and angry at the pain that death and the sin behind it has caused, but also he's upset that the resurrection and the life is standing in front of people right then and there, and they're missing it. And so even when misunderstood, Jesus shows us that we need to continue to take steps towards friendship. Even when Martha, missed it, didn't understand what was going on here with Jesus, Jesus shows us that we still need to continue to take steps towards friendship. Now, also, you don't only go first once in pursuing and building friendships, even if it means risking, again, being misunderstood, even if it means risking being rejected. Now, there's seasons where you need to continue to take the initiative, but don't be like a creepy stalker, okay? Like, understand, like, the appropriate boundaries that people may be putting up. But also don't be like this. Oh, well, I tried to connect with that person, that group, once, and we just didn't really click, meaning they didn't immediately line up with all my favorite things, all my favorite topics, all the things that I love and the way I'm wired. Okay? We want this instant connection, and it's just not the way that building meaningful, deep friendships works. See, the inherent problem is our self-focus, right? Even when it comes to friendships. And I hear this all the time, and sometimes I'm even guilty of feeding into it as a pastor. People come up, you might be newer to church, you say, hey, do you have a group that will work for me? And while we want to say, yeah, of course we have a group that will work for you, the reality is probably not. We probably don't have this picture-perfect group that you have in your mind that exists for you to just pop into immediately, that checks all of your boxes. But that doesn't mean that there's not friendships to be forged. That doesn't mean that there's not relationships to be developed. They're there. They're just not going to look the way that we want them to necessarily. And so as humans, we hold tightly to our comfort and our own convenience, but that's not where meaningful, deep, and lasting friendships are built. We've all shared the excuses. I'm too busy. I've been hurt in the past. I'm just doing this makes me feel anxious. I just don't want to be rejected. Maybe rejected again. But what we need to know is that Jesus experienced all of those possible negative outcomes in pursuing friendships, and he goes first anyways, right? I mean, think about Judas, right? Jesus still pursues Judas knowing that he's going to be betrayed by him. And so let's look at the final part of this account and see what we can learn about friendship from Jesus as we finish out this passage in John 11. Picking up in verse 38. Jesus, once more, deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, referring to Lazarus, by this time there's a bad odor, for he has been in there 4 days. Then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you've heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for your benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. Now, I think Jesus models something that most of us appreciate about those great friendships we have. You have to have a sense of humor even in the difficult times. Jesus goes full youth pastor mode here. Think about this. They roll the stone away. The stench coming out is like day 4 of a middle school boys' cabin at summer camp, right? Like it's overpowering. And then he has Lazarus come out mummy style, wrapped up, face covered, hopping his way out of the tomb. Okay, it's a little funny at least. Okay, but in all seriousness, like we need those friends to again interject some humor, some joy, even in the midst of difficult stuff. But in all seriousness, we need to remove barriers like Jesus does. I think it's really the last takeaway I want you to see in John 11 this morning. Now, you and I are not expected to remove the barriers of death or to resurrect our friends. That's not something that you and I can do. But we can walk in the way of Jesus of being a friend who brings life. Think about this. When's the last time you brought joy or comfort or healing into the life of a friend? Maybe conversely, when's the last time you brought division and hurt, either in your words or actions or your lack of actions? We can be like Jesus in our pursuit of friendship in so many other ways by simply sitting with and soaking up the truths and the way that even this one encounter that Jesus has in the Gospels has so much to speak to you and I today. But so what? What's the one thing you can do today to move forward and to grab hold of those better friendships that await those who go first? Well, I would give you just one simple place to start. Linger in the lobby. Linger in the lobby. Now, you might be joining us online and saying, hey, that's great if I'm at a physical service, but if I'm online, how do I do that? Well, we're going to create a space for you today to step into a Zoom room right after our online service and engage in community in that space. They told me that I can't call it the upper Zoom, like a companion to the upper room, but we'll let you guys vote on that, okay? But we want to create space for community. Whether it's in a physical space, whether it's in a digital space, we want you to be able to go first and have opportunities to do that and show up in real life, okay? And again, it's just as real on a Zoom call as it is in one of our physical lobbies in our campuses. But be the one to go first in conversation, in invitation, and then after you do those two things, be the first one to listen. That's where friendships live and reside. Is there going to be some awkwardness? Yeah. Is there a chance of rejection? Sure. But what might shift in your life if you began to be the one to go first, to extend the invitation to friendship? What might shift in your life, in the life of another person? It's been a great start to week 1 of this series. We really hope that you'll join us for week 2, because if you've ever thought about what would it be like if you had a trusted how-to guide to just build, maintain, and find friendships and enjoy those. Well, that's what we're going to be talking about next week, and we're going to see how God's Word actually gives us some very clear, very easy to live out how-tos to pursue friendships. Thank you so much for joining us for the Lost Art of Friendship series, and we hope to have you back here next week with us at Rainier View.